Okay, welcome everybody. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abridged code of Jewish law. We are doing chapter 36, the laws of salting meat. So, as we said last week, that we are not allowed to consume blood. So there's three ways to remove blood. After the shchita, the slaughtering, there's allow blood to drain, and then there's the removing major veins and arteries, and then we salt the pieces of meat. So far we said that what we need to do is before we salt it, we have to rinse it to make sure there's no blood on the outside, and we have to soak it to soften it up a little bit. And this is going to allow the salt to be able to absorb. So chapter 36, and we're up to number 8. Okay. So the salt that we put on the meat from all around it, we're going to see if to put it all four sides. It sucks the salt out. So I don't know if you've ever seen it, but you put on the salt, and after some time the salt is pink for sure, but quite often reddish. Depends. Chicken is normally more pinkish, and if it's larger pieces of meat, it become quite reddish, and it's sucked out drawn out the blood that's on the inside, and it goes into the salt. Now, in order for this to happen, so number 8, the salt can't be too fine, can't be like ground up like flour. Dim kain, because if you do that, namis miyad alabas dam, it'll dissolve immediately, and it won't draw out the blood. It'll be too small. It'll just dissolve in the first little bit that comes out, and that'll be the end of it. They kind of big chunks, like big chunks of rock salt, something, kind of big chunks. Because they'll just fall off. They won't stay. Ella, so what do you need? Hey, Bainani. They have to be average. We're not defining average over here yet. Like salt is used in cooking. We don't use in cooking today. Today we use very fine salt. But yavesh yispaza hativ, and it should be dry so it spreads well. So you can buy the kosher salt. Now the kosher salt usually is also slightly finer. They call it kosher salt. I guess originally they sold it for kashering, but it's probably a drop too fine also. But it's like a little bit larger than that. It's not the regular salt you put in your salt and pepper shakers. That's slightly larger ones that you have. Okay, number 9. You have to spread the salt on the meat on all sides. It has to be all the way around. There shouldn't be any place without salt. And therefore poultry has to be opened up well. So you can salt them well on the insides. So you may have sometimes heard of, they sell chicken and they call it splits. Right? They call it splits. And what it means is that when they kasher it, they'd already cut it into at least 2. So hand salting, you can obviously on the outside of a piece of meat or a chicken, you can put salt everywhere. If you're careful, you put salt everywhere. But to put it inside the chicken, you got to put your hand. It's quite difficult. So it used to be, and some places still is, considered a higher standard of kashrus, if you buy split chickens. So split means they cut it before they salted it, and they. So most chicken pieces today, let's say a person buys, thighs, different things. It was cut up after it was all shechted and everything. The splits is particularly they cut it before. Sorry, not shechted before. Can't cut it before you shecht it. Cut up after you salted it. So the fact that it's in pieces doesn't mean anything. So you have to order the splits. It normally was a little bit expensive, a little more expensive because another step, and they have to pay someone to do it. And that's what they used to do. Now some places still do that. A lot of places nowadays have like a spray gun, it's like a spray paint gun, with the, like the hydraulic one connected with the hose, and it shoots salt instead of paint. And so they actually shoot the salt inside the chicken. And that if they have the right equipment, that does just as good a job as the splits. So I think Empire is the one that, brought that technology in. But other places also do it. And so that would be the same as having the splits.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I was wondering why they didn't have kosher sugar or kosher pepper. They make a big deal about the fact that it's kosher. I thought it was
Yeah.
the sugar. I thought it was the salt that was kosher.
Yeah, it seems that way. Well, truth is, the guy who makes the packaging nowadays probably doesn't have any idea, and that's what he thinks. But yes, it used to be. Yes, they used to sell coarser salt for kashering. Yeah, that was. And just to mention, I don't know how much you. Hopefully, you don't look at spend too much time looking at the non-kosher meat. Saying, especially not looking at the prices compared to the other one. Make you feel bad. But the chickens, the kosher chickens, sometimes have some feathers left on the wing, on the leg, and and more feathers than the non-kosher ones. So why is that? So the flicker machines, they have it that knocks the feathers off. In the non-kosher ones, they shoot out warm water. And that softens the skin, opens up the pores a little bit. And then the flicker machine, it flicks, it knocks off all the feathers, and it takes them off. And does a pretty good job. But for kashering, we can't do that. Because if you put hot water on it before it's been salted, what will end up happening is that you've already moved, you cooked the outside essentially while the blood was still there. And so it's going to make kashrus issues. So in the kosher poultry farms, when they shecht, they only shoot cold water. So it doesn't do as good a job, and that's why we end up with a few more feathers.
My wife notices that certain brands have more feathers than other brands.
Yeah, well, it's probably it depends on the technology of their flicker machine. I'm not going to say the age. Obviously, the older setups are going to have it more, but sometimes it's just age. Some people invested, like you can get a basic machine for a few $1,000s. It's not going to do commercial quantities and survive very long, but it's a very basic thing. But they have machines that are, the same size. I mean, the commercial ones and these huge plants will be hundreds of thousands, but the same size, the ones a few $1,000s, you can get, $30,000, $40,000, and it'll do a better job. If you're ever somewhere and you don't have access to the machine, you can just pull the whole skin off. If you cut it and just pull all the skin off, all the feathers will come off. That way you don't have to sit there and start plucking each feather by hand. So sometimes, if you do go to kapara, sometimes you can, since you paid for it, you can take the chicken home. Now, it used to be kaparas, the whole point was, okay, besides that you did something, but the chicken went to the needy to have a meal for the fast on Yom Kippur. Nowadays, rarely is that done. It's normally the money, right? Organizations run the kaparas, and people pay, and the money goes to whatever cause it is. And sometimes the chickens are also sold on, and therefore that money goes as well. But some places, you can take your chicken. It's not a problem. So we've taken home.
So are some places just dumping the chickens?
You find that particularly if like kippers like Shabbos or something, some places, or they usually smaller places do that. I imagine in Florida it's a pretty big enterprise, and some organizations are going to make good money out of it. They're not going to dump it. They're going to get what they can. But some smaller places, and I'm not sure really when they just dump it, whether it's even worth anything to use a chicken. It's I don't want to speak against Jewish customs, God forbid, but if it's just going to waste, I think it's just being wasteful. Better off just using money and giving it to tzedakah. But you can't. So we have been such a place in the past, and we took ours. The money went to whatever the charity was, to the organization, and we took ours home, and we just pulled the skin off. Didn't have the time to start plucking 5-6 chickens, and you sold it like that. But we can't have. Although when we soak the meat before we salt it, it should be, let's call it room temperature. I don't want to say warm. It can't be cold. It can't be cold, because then it hardens the meat. But you have we'll call it normal sort of room temperature. I know that changes in summer to winter, but let's say will be a springtime room temperature, and that's all we can put on it before it's being salted. And so that's why the flicker machines aren't as effective in the kosher ones, and therefore you get a few more feathers. It's not using hot water. Okay, so the inside of the chickens have to be salted. So either they use the spray guns, and if they're not the spray guns, they should have what they call the split chicken, where they cut it open, and where they just take whole ones and just try and mush around with their hand. It's very ineffective. I'm not saying it's not kosher, but it's certainly not as good a standard of kashrus as if they split it or use the spray gun. Okay, number 10. Habasa b'milchoi. So the meat, when you salt it, you have to put it on an area where the blood that drains out can flow away, can drain away. So again, when the large commercial setups, they have specially designed equipment, different things. If you're doing a backyard job, the best thing is like a milk crate, or the soda crates. So they're not solid, but you can put a piece of meat or a chicken on it. It's not going to fall, but there's plenty of open areas. Everything just any liquid would just an upside down milk crate, something like that. And so put salt, you put it on that, and it drains away. And therefore, lo yamed is a sal im a bossa al gari karka. You can't put the meat, he's saying, in a basket, but no, it's in some type of container, plastic container or something, on the ground. Because if you just put it in the container, then the blood that comes out is going to pool instead of draining. The blood won't be able to flow away, won't be able to drain away. And then it's just going to be sitting in the blood, which will reabsorb back in and won't totally defeat the purpose of salting it, because not everything will absorb back in, but a certain amount will. Well, if you have it on if you put it, let's say, like as for an example, an upside down sort of milk crate, and it just drains away. So whatever's come out stays out. and isn't in contact anymore. And so even after the meat has been in the salt for the right amount of time, before you rinse it off, you shouldn't put it in any place where it can't drain. So even though you've left the salt on for the right amount of time, so seemingly the job is done. But until you wash off the salt, you can't put it somewhere where the blood will the liquids that come out will pool. Now, if you salt it on on some type of board, a flat, like a countertop, it has to be sloped, it has to be slanted. That's another way to do it. It can be slanted and it drains off. So the large commercial places, they have stainless steel counters, at an angle, sloped at an angle, and it drains down, and then next to it is like a guttering, and whatever drains in, and they hose down like that. But so if you don't have something like a milk crate, at least something that's slanted, the shiaz of hativ, so whatever comes out will drain away well. And you shouldn't have a groove a hole where it accumulates. So you might think you could put it in some type of container that maybe has a drainage and it all accumulates in the drain. You shouldn't do that because it can fill up and overflow and make problems. Malech oifus odoifen shleima sheish l'toich beis kibble. Now, if you are salting fowl, birds, or a large piece of meat that has some type of receptacle, the shape is a receptacle. So if you have a side of beef, so in the ribs, you've got a big, it goes in. So you have to put that side down, right? Because if you have it up, the receptacle-shaped piece, the blood will accumulate. So you have to have that piece down, so everything drains away. Okay, for those who joined us in the middle of that one, chapter 36, number 11. And we're discussing salting of the meat. After it's been shechted, salting the meat to draw out the blood, so we're not consuming the blood. Now, once the blood has been drained, the meat tastes different. Okay, it's I didn't sample both to be able to tell you what the difference is, Baruch Hashem, but apparently there is a taste difference. And getting close to 20 years ago, there was a scandal in a certain supermarket, kosher supermarket in Monsey. There was a person who he owned he rented space in the supermarket and he sold meat. And so officially his business was he bought large quantities, bought meat in bulk, like by the pallet and different things. And he packaged it into small sort of take-home size, 1 pound things and 2 pounds, whatever it was. And people bought that and he had a markup. Unfortunately, his Yetzer Hara got to him. And he also bought non-kosher meat, unfortunately, for even cheaper. And he was selling that, claiming it was kosher meat. So how did he get caught? So one of the things that happened was that there was a lady who had become religious, and she could taste that this meat tasted like non-salted meat, like what you used to eat. And she brought it to the attention of the local rabbinic organization. And then they got a few complaints, a few suspicions. Once they got a few, they think they had a private investigator, and they saw that truckloads were coming from the wrong place. And then one of the things I was selling was Cornish hens, and they contacted the supplier, and that supposedly it was from, and this guy was selling in a week more Cornish hens than they shechted in a month. Every week, and that's when they hired the private investigator, and they caught him, and that's what happened. So it tastes different. This is why you have to make sure that whenever you buy meat, that not just the place where the meat was shechted and salted has a good rabbinical supervision, but any store where it's being packaged, repackaged. It's very, very important. One of my sons-in-law in Phoenix, he does that. He does the same thing. He brings from the East Coast and by the pallet, and he packages it because there's not a local supply of kosher meat. Right. So he has there's kashrus, the vada kashrus, the various communal rabbanim. And he has supervision, even though all he's doing is cutting the smaller pieces and putting it in, because after that incident, it just highlighted, even though I guess technically if you trust the guy, you trust the guy, but it's not necessarily a halachic obligation to have the supervision in that situation. But unfortunately, we see things happened. So it's very, very important to do it. Very important. Okay. Now, number 11. How long do we salt the meat? Yeah, basa munach v'milcha shir achas. Shir shah, sorry. The meat should remain in salt, covered in salt, for an hour. B'shas hadchach dai 24 minutim. Now, at a very pressing need, 24 minutes works, but ideally for an hour. Ideally for an hour. So most commercial places today with a good hashgacha, it'll be an hour. There are some places that do half an hour. And as we see, we can't say that's it's not kosher, but that's really, it's pressing need. Pressing needs, you have to understand, in times past, there was no refrigeration. So you couldn't shecht in advance. Today, let's say, we got Yontif coming up. Rosh Hashanah is going to be Wednesday night, Thursday, Friday, and then the Shabbos. So what could you do for refrigeration? You would have to shecht on Friday. So it's already been Rosh Hashanah. Long davening. We've got Shabbos coming. Everything has to hustle, quick. So you have to rely on leniencies. Today, a person can load up their freezer. They can even cook food in the fridge. It's a lot of these leniencies. We really probably shouldn't be relying on them nowadays. We don't have the pressing, urgent needs under normal circumstances. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem, we live a higher standard of living. We have more support, and we should take advantage of it. Number 12. So after the salt has been on the meat for length of time. So again, step one, as we mentioned last week, is we hose it off, we rinse it to make sure that there's no dirt or blood on the outside that's going to interfere between the salt and the meat. Then we soak it for half an hour to soften up a little bit. And then we cover totally the entire surface in salt. And we leave it in the salt for an hour. So once we've done all of that, first we shake off the salt. And then we rinse it in water 3 times. So today they hose it. They didn't, before they had hose, they used to put it into different buckets and they rinsed it quite well. But today you hose it. The Isha Yiras Hashem, and a God-fearing woman, because it was normally the ladies of the house who prepared the food. Today, Baruch Hashem, we all buy our meat post salting and various things. But once upon a time, you took your own chicken, you took it to the sheicher, he shechted it for you, you brought it home, you salted it, you plucked it, and then you salted. You did all this at home. Today it's all done like that. So the lady Yeshlo Lashgiach Ba'atzma Al Adacha Basa. She should personally supervise the rinsing of the meat. Because sometimes, if a maid is carrying the water on her shoulders, Timsamsim, she's going to be, when you have to slap the water from the well, people want to use the barest minimum. No one wants to use more water and have to go back to the well again. So hired help would be cheap on the water. Again, today, Baruch Hashem, with the plumbing, all these things are a lot easier. And a person could come, if you don't rinse it properly, you could come, God forbid, to the prohibition of consuming blood, because there'll be blood still on the outside, in the salt. Care, you have to be very careful not to leave the unrinsed meat in any vessel without water, right? Because you don't want it to pull. You have to make sure that you've rinsed it and you cleaned it very well. Yeah. So as we said today, it's really sort of hosed off. Yeah, okay. 13. Okay, 13. Now when it comes to fowl, you want to make sure, it comes to birds, you want to make sure that you have removed the head of the chicken before you soak it. And if you salt it with the head still attached, now you have to go ask a rabbi. And the same precaution applies to animals, but normally people don't bring home whole animals. The head, so first of all, as we mentioned last week, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch often says you're gonna have to ask a rabbi, because since it's a summary, you can't go through all the details, and it'll send you to someone who hopefully has been tested and knows all the details. That's how it goes. But over here, the head, the issue is the blood doesn't drain, and if you've got the brain and different things inside, it can be problematic. Yeah, okay. Number 14. Basa shloim nimlach adayin. You have meat and has not yet been kashed. Right? So it's been shechted, blood was drained. Maybe even if it was a large animal, we cut out the veins and the fats, different things, different types of chaylev you can't eat. But we haven't salted it yet. That's what I mean by it hasn't been kashed. We haven't salted it. You cannot put this meat in a place or where salt is sometimes kept. Because what's going to happen, a inadequate salting can do damage. It can be worse. So what you need to do, therefore, so you don't want to put it in, especially if this is the area where you salt your meat, you have to be very careful. So what you do, you need to have a special utensil where non-salted meat goes. You shouldn't use this utensil, this bowl, for vegetables or fruit or anything by the like. Anything that you would normally eat without rinsing should not be used in that vessel. Because sometimes blood from the meat will get stuck onto the sides of that vessel. And then from the vessel, it'll get stuck onto the food, attached to the food. Then you're going to cook this food with the blood. If it's something you normally rinse, then it's not so much an issue, because if anything got on it, you're going to rinse it off, and it's not so problematic. Okay, test valve number 15. The head has to be cut off before you soak the meat. And the brain has to be removed. This is, of course, we're talking about now if you're going to eat the brain. So today most places don't sell brain, but if you were, likroy es hakrum sha'alav, you have to tear open, you have to remove the membrane that's around the brain. The shoyse malchav ne'atzmoi, and the brain has to be soaked and salted separate to the meat. Right, the brain has much more blood, so it has to be soaked. So first you have to remove the membrane. The membrane will stop the salting and the soaking from working, and you soak it on its own, not with other meat. You can soak it with other brains, but not with regular meat. Also, liver has to be kept done separately. We'll get to there when we get there. But these organs that are like blood soaked, blood drenched. And so you have to soak them separately, you have to salt them separately. The head, once you've removed it from the body and removed the brain, it's like any other piece of meat. You got to put salt on the inside, salt on the outside. And although it doesn't say here, because it's the shape of a receptacle, you have to put the receptacle down so the blood won't accumulate. And you can even salt it with its hairs, with some hair on it. Okay, 17 is one step off the meat. So what are we saying here? You have bones with marrow. Now, if these bones still have flesh attached, there's meat attached, you can salt them as they are attached to meat. So you got let's say a leg bone, and there's marrow inside, and it's surrounded by meat. So you salt the meat on the outside, and that works. But if you've removed the meat and you just have the bone, now you have to salt them separately. And you can't salt it with meat, right? Because the putting salt on the bone, or that's what you're going to do, and the ends, and it'll have an effect in drawing out any blood that's seeped into the marrow. But obviously, bone doesn't allow salt to be as effective as meat does.
I don't see it.
Okay, 17, Yud Zayin. Raglei behemoth.
Can I
Sure,
ask you a question, please?
please.
Can you please tell us if there any explanation why it is prohibited to eat anything with blood?
Oh,
I'm just
okay,
curious.
Yeah. So it's back to the fact that we've discussed in other subjects, that everything in the physical world is a reflection of the spiritual world. Now, every creature, every living entity has a nefesh. Okay, we're going to loosely translate that as soul. Okay, a uniquely human soul we call neshama, but a human also has a nefesh, because we're a composite being of a neshama, a piece of godliness, and a biological animal. Right, so we're a composite being. So we have two, but what ends up happening is that the godly energy that keeps something alive, that we'll just call soul for lack of a better word, it's called the nefesh. Now the nefesh is enclosed in the blood. The nefesh, it's enclosed in the blood, and that's why the blood is what transports everything around the body. Right? Because the physical world is a reflection of the spiritual world. Physically, the blood transports the nutrients, it takes away the waste, it transports the oxygen. Everything is given to the entire body from the blood, because the nefesh, which is the spiritual part that's enclosed in this physical blood, the nefesh is what provides the life force for this living thing to every part of the body.
Okay.
And so and this is not even a hidden, sometimes things are hinted, but here we have outright. When the verses say we can't eat blood, it says ki adam nefesh, because the blood is the nefesh. The nefesh is in the blood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
No
Thank
problems.
you for this explanation.
Yeah.
It makes it so much more.
Yeah. So,
Rabbi.
and I'm sorry I didn't mention, I should have actually spoken about this in the introduction last week to the chapter. I apologize that I didn't, because it's very fundamental. Yeah, was David?
Yeah.
Yeah.
While you're on the subject, there's a soul, sort of a soul, that keeps in existence inanimate objects.
Yes.
Is that also called a nefesh?
So that's not called a nefesh. When in Kabbalistic they call it nitzois, or nitzoitzos in plural, called sparks. In other words, a nefesh is what we're going to call soul, for lack of a better word. See, even though in Hebrew there's several words that mean soul. Like lahavdil, I don't know if it's true or not, but they say Eskimos have all these different words for snow, right? Because since it's their environment, it's a harder snow, a softer snow, a part melted snow, fresh snow, they have all these different things. So for Jews, our spirituality is our environment. So we have several words that speak about soul, different aspects of the soul. In English, there's just one word, soul. But although we might call it the soul of an inanimate object, is for lack of a better word, but it's a fundamentally different idea. It's a spark of this. In other words, there's some type of spark of spirituality that keeps this thing in existence, that makes it exist. But a nefesh is something that's living. Even plant life, which is living, it's not really called a nefesh. Right? Plant life, plants grow, they reproduce. There's certainly not a stone, which is totally inanimate. It's a different level of existence. But even plant life already, we're not calling it nefesh. Nefesh is animal and higher.
Is plant life also called a nitzutz?
Sometimes. It's not as discussed as much. It contains nitzoitzes, like has sparks, right? And again, since we're talking about it, it's slightly off topic, but this is why we eat objects, right? So, well, not just eat, while we interact with anything. We interact with things. Our goal is to elevate the nitzoitzes, elevate the sparks, elevate the spiritualities within something, and return it to its source. So inanimate objects, so let's just say, I don't know, the computers were on. Right, so we are learning Torah. We're developing our spirituality. We're connecting to Hashem, using this, and most of the ingredients of computers, things that make plastics out of, the glass, it's all inanimate objects. So we're taking these sparks and we're elevating it to its source. Unfortunately, there are people who use computers for other things, and unfortunately have the opposite effect. When we eat, that's one way of utilizing. if we say a blessing before we eat, and make sure it's kosher what we eat, and we say a blessing afterwards, then we take the sparks, we take it the life force and the nefesh, it's an animal, we elevate it to its source. So there's a kid's book. My kids are too old for it, but now we read to the grandkids. It's Fishy Friday. And the point of the book is that there's all the fish want to get caught for Shabbos, because they want to be on the Shabbos table. They want to get eaten on Shabbos. Now, on a physical level, obviously that doesn't happen. Fish are trying not to get caught, if they even understand what's going on at all. But fish are trying not to be caught. They don't want to be someone else's food. But on a spiritual level, the soul, for lack of a better word, the godliness that keeps these fish in existence, that's what it wants. Everything in creation wants nothing more than to be utilized for Hashem. And if that means being caught and become gefilte fish, or whatever we happen to have, and be part of the Shabbos meal or Yom Tov meal, that's exactly what it wants. That's its dream of all existence. So we have a huge responsibility. It's not just eating not to be materialistic, in a way not to be materialistic, and to eat to stay alive. We have this responsibility to be able to elevate whatever we come in contact with. Okay. 17. Raglei behemoths, right? Animals' feet, the hooves and things. So, what do we have to do here? It's sarichin lachteich roshet lofim koydem shriya. You have to cut off the tips of the hooves before you soak it. Right? See, you got this nail type. I mean, it's pretty similar to the human nail, but it's very thick, and it's not going to allow any absorption of the blood. So we have to cut it off. So the blood will be able to drain from them. And we have to, the salt has to be put in a way that the blood can drain off. So we can also salt feet with the hair on. Okay. 18. Halev, the heart. So again, the heart is saturated with blood. So what do we have to do? You have to cut it open. So the blood will come out. So he doesn't say here, but in Big Shulchan Aruch it says we need to cut lengthways and widthways. I don't want to say across because but like that, like a plus sign. So it should be cut down the lengthways and widthways to really open it up. 19. Hareo, the lungs. So nahagim gamkein lachasoy liftoch kon konim agdolim shvakolim eshriya. We also cut them open, and open the large tubes before we soak it. But all these things we can soak and we can salt. Now 20, we're going to get to liver, kaved, liver. Now for some reason, although no kosher butcher store, any decent place with decent hashgacha would ever sell meat that's not already kashered, all the meat they sell, anything that's got a decent rabbinical supervision, all the meat's been salted, it's all kashered, it's all fine. For some reason, people still sell liver, not kashered sometimes. And it's very problematic because liver is probably the most difficult of everything to kasher properly. So unless someone, when I say training, you don't have to go to a course on how to kasher liver, but I think you do need to watch and someone who's knows how to kasher it well, and try it out yourself with someone watching before you try it yourself. So it doesn't have to be a whole course. It could be in one afternoon. It's not a problem. But it's not something I think you can just do from learning theoretically in a book. You have to see how it's done. So, hakaveh the liver, yesh boy harbe dam. It's got a lot of blood. It's totally saturated, and salting is not sufficient. Salting will not draw out all the blood. The fichach therefore the chatchila ain't the kana labishloi al de melicha. It doesn't help in the first instance to salt it and cook it. The reason we say in the first instance is not that you're allowed to, but if for some reason it only got salted, and it took away a percentage of its blood, and then it got cooked with other meat and different things, then the blood could become nullified in the mixture. But this is all after the fact if it happened by mistake. But in the first instance, salting is not sufficient. So what do you have to do? You have to broil it with fire, direct flame, or the heat of the flame, and the flame draws out. If you ever seen something on a barbecue, you see, let's say, it's not talking about blood because we've kashed our meat, but you're talking about, say, a fatty piece of meat. You see it all starts to drip down. Drips down to the coals, and sometimes the fat makes a fire, so it's, right, the heat, the flame draws out the moisture. So you have to broil it. Now, first you have to cut it open well. And you put the pieces on the fire. In order the fire should draw out all the blood that's absolved in it. And we also have to rinse it before you put it on the fire, so there's no dried blood on the outside, from cutting up the animal, the shechting. And you salt it a little bit. Put a little bit of salt on it as you broil it. So and you have to broil it to the point where you would eat it. So it doesn't have to be burnt through and through, but it has to be broiled to the point it doesn't need any more cooking to eat. And afterwards, you give it a rinse, for that washes away any blood that came out of it that may be still on the surface. And you should rinse it 3 times. And then if you want to make fried, gehakta liver, you want to chop it and broil it, and then fry it. You can do all these things. So practically, as I said, you should really watch someone else kasher liver. They do sell sometimes. Restaurants or caterers, sometimes they have these electric broilers that have been specially designed. So let's leave that aside. But if you're at home and you don't have specialized equipment and you were going to kasher liver, the best thing, rephrase that. The easiest, practical, affordable way to kasher liver. So of course you have to soak it first. You have to make sure there's nothing on the outside. But if you get something like, I don't know if you ever, let's say like the disposable barbecues, not to kasher it on the disposable barbecue, but it has like that grill, because whatever grill you use, you can't use for other food to broil it. It has to only be used for liver. So they have these things, you put it upside down, so it'll be a little bit off the ground, and it's got lots of holes, and it can take the heat. And then one of those mini blowtorches, it comes with a little gas canister that, not a tradesman's blowtorch, a little one you can get like in a department store, and spray the blowtorch. So you put a bit of salt on it, and you use the blowtorch till it's cooked. Turn it over in the middle, and that's and then of course you have to rinse it afterwards. So that's probably the easiest way if you're going to kasher liver at home. Not everyone has these little blowtorches. As I said, liver is probably the most complicated thing that we actually eat. It could be a heart or a brain is more complicated, but generally speaking, we don't eat it. But liver is the most complicated. What's eaten? Okay. 21. Now, liver has to be broiled specifically, particularly on an open fire, and not in an oven that has coals. If the coals have a flame coming, that's an open fire, but I mean like glowing coals or something. And you can't wrap it in paper when you broil it, even thin paper, because it's going to hold the blood in. Now, Chapes 22, you can't salt the liver before you broil it. So as we said, as you're broiling, you put a light, not the normal amount of salting you do, just a little bit of light. And this is another reason why you got to actually see someone do it so you understand how much to put on. It's just a tiny little bit. You can't salt it like we normally salt meat beforehand. Like you salt meat. And for sure, one of the worst problems you could create would be salting liver together with other pieces of meat, where the juice intermingles, it comes out, the blood. And then you could have liver blood become absorbed into the meat. It becomes very problematic what to do with the meat afterwards. It's going to depend on a lot of factors, therefore it's not here, but if something happened, it's really something you have to ask an expert in. Okay, 23. Hatchoil, the spleen. Dinoi kishar bosa. It's like regular meat. Except, you just have to remove the membrane. It's got a membrane around it, and you have to remove the membrane. Now, it's not because the membrane stops the blood coming out, but because it has chaylev, a yellowish type of fat. So on the animals, there's two types of fat. There's like a whitish fat, which is called shuman, and that's kosher. Not necessarily healthy, but that's the schmaltz, that we're talking about. And there's a yellowish fat that's called chaylev, and the chaylev you're not allowed to eat in domesticated animals. So it has chaylev stuck to it, so you have to remove the membrane. Once you've done that, you kasher it like any other meat. You also have to cut off the veins. So what you do is you cut it, you take hold of the top of the vein and you pull it out. So I wouldn't exactly say with tweezers, but it's looks like a tweezers. And they take an instrument and they take the end and they pull the whole vein out. So when you pull the one on the top, it branches off. There's three like cords that come out with it. You have to be careful as you pull it out that it doesn't get severed. Because if it does, then you've got part of the vein stuck inside, and now you're going to have to cut open the spleen and dig it out, because these veins have too large a concentration of blood, and they're designed to keep the blood inside, so it minimizes the effect of the kashering. So all these things have to be removed. Chaf Daled. Okay. Okay, so they translate that as the mesentery membrane. It's part of the stomach. So the animals has several stomachs, but you have, again, so they used to use, today in most Western countries it's illegal to sell it. But sausages and different things that it's an artificially made casing. It used to be they used actual intestines. So, we're talking about, let's say you have kishka, in a cholent. So kishka literally in Yiddish means intestines, means the gut, the stomach. So so today, the kishka that you buy, it's the stuffing inside an artificially made casing. But it used to be in the old days, they took the actual intestines, and they obviously rinsed it out well, and they filled it with stuffing. There's a famous story. There was a king came to spend a Shabbos meal with the chief rabbi of a large city, and he was particularly enamored with the Shabbos food, and his favorite always kishka, just loved the kishka, and he asked the Rebbitzin to write down the recipe after Shabbos. They're going to give to the royal chef, and he wants to eat kishka. So, all right, so they send the recipe to the palace. The chef makes the recipe, and it's putrid. It's just disgusting. And the king first accuses the chef. You're trying to poison me. He says, no, I did exactly the recipe. So now they figure it's the Rebbitzin trying to poison the king, chas v'sholom. So they get the rabbi and Rebbitzin get summoned into the palace, and they said, yeah, you're poisoning the king. So what do you mean this? And then they smell it's just, and they go through the recipe and they're trying to work out what's wrong. And finally the Rebbitzin says, did you wash out the intestines before you made it? He says, no. Wasn't in the recipe. He said, well, I thought that was obvious. Right? No one thought you're going to start putting food in there with all the waste product. And, it was like, anyway. So sometimes you have to spell out, even the most simple thing. Okay. So this member is part of the intestine, and all the intestines. You salt them on the outside where the fat is connected. Fat sticks to them. There's also chaylev and different things that has to be cut off, but this one after everything's been, the nicker, the trebring, we've cut everything off. Let's squeeze in one more, 25. Keva. Right, so the keva is another part of the stomach, but it's not waste product there. It's actually food. So keva shel egel, to met now calf's keva, shimsa bo cholov, and so it's full of milk. So what do? Sheifchim is a cholov koyim shriya. You have to pour out all the milk. You cut it again. You make a cross. You cut it open. You have to empty it of the milk before you soak it. But once you've done that, it's like any other meat. All right. Any questions? No?
I have an unrelated question.
Unrelated, please.
Okay, I asked you once before about Asher Yatzar in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out if I'm getting up at let's say at 8 or 9, how many hours before do I stop saying Asher Yatzar? 3 hours, 2 hours, 4 hours?
8 or 9 in the evening.
No, I'm getting up at 8. I'm getting up, let's say at 9.
Oh, in the morning.
Yeah, so let's say I'm getting up at 9 a.m. in the morning. So if I go to the bathroom at 6 a.m., do I still say Asher Yatzar?
No, so once it's light, then it's just part of the process, because you have to wash out your mouth and you have to be all dressed properly, and you say the morning blessings and everything goes. So part of the morning routine. So I think it really depends how often one's getting up, but because you mentioned that maybe it's more frequently. So say first, not you. Let's just say in general. Normally, I would say someone wakes up before midnight, It means they napped, So you get up, and once it's post midnight, it might be 3 in the morning. It's almost the morning. But if it's going to be regularly, then maybe never really slept long enough to really have to rinse out your mouth and do all the things before you can say a blessing. But I think once it's dawn, then for sure it's you just call it the morning activity.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
no problems. So have a wonderful evening, a wonderful week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I'll see you soon. Take care.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
You, Rabbi.
Oh, okay. See you. Take care.